Today, let's ask the question, how should we engage in cross-cultural ministry? Today, I'm talking with my friend Kelly, who runs the Graceful Warrior Project, and she has some really great inspirational words and encouragement, and also just practical advice and wisdom for cross-cultural ministry and how it has impacted her and her life and the work that she does through Graceful Warrior Project, and just some really great thoughts on engaging in different cultures and ministering to them, and also just having a partnership mindset when we go and minister to different believers around the world, or they minister to us, where we partner together to do God's work together. And instead of us as modern Western Americans going somewhere and dropping off a bunch of stuff or doing some housework and then leaving, instead of that, actually having a meaningful family relationship and seeing the strengths and weaknesses that we both bring to the table, and seeing how we need one another, and how God's work is not possible when we don't have a big, bold, beautiful, robust family of God that lives in a myriad of places around the world, coming together to unify over following Jesus. So here is her wonderful interview. I'm so excited to share this. She is just like a little ray of sunshine. So hopefully this gives you some encouragement and perspective and wisdom, but also just brightens your day. So here we go. Hey, Kelly, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm so excited that I get to talk to you today. I
I
feel like
know,
we
me
don't
too.
get to talk often. We just send little messages on
I
Instagram. So
know.
this is lovely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I was trying to remember the first time that we met, and I don't actually remember. Maybe at like a
No,
Mariners
I
ministry.
literally don't have a clue. There was a time where I didn't know who you were. Then there was a time where we were just like on messaging each other back and forth, and I don't know when it started.
Sometime in the Mariners days back in the day. But yeah, why don't you give everybody maybe a little intro to you and your ministry and tell them what you're all about.
Awesome. Thank you. So I always dreamed of being a missionary since I was really little. And when I was 28, I got to step into that calling. Um, I moved to Eastern Congo, and it was like everything I wanted, and also like so difficult at the same time. As you can imagine, living in a third world country in a war zone and the rape capital of the world, like it just brought so much with it. But at the same time, like little me was like, oh my gosh, we're actually doing this. So that was really, it was a huge, like, eye-opening experience for me. Um, Actually doing the thing that you've always dreamed of doing. And then when I came home for a break and to restock on supplies, I felt like God was saying, you need to rest. And I just thought, like, wait a second, like I sold my car, I quit my job, like I just for 7 months of living in Congo, like I dreamed my whole life, like what a short little time. And I felt like he was taking it away from me. But he was really looking after me. And um I really took time. I was actually really sick, like with things that I had gotten from over there, parasites and adrenal fatigue and ringworm, like all sorts of stuff. And so it took a while for me to feel like my best again. And when I did, it was like that whole time that I was waiting for God to send me back to Congo, he was changing my heart so that I would be open to what he was doing. And uh I felt like he was tapping on my shoulders saying, start a nonprofit, start a nonprofit. And I kept being like, no, thank you. I don't know how to do that. That's above my pay grade. I already felt imposter syndrome teaching self-defense in a war zone. But I quickly got over that because I thought, okay, well, I'm here and I know I've practiced jujitsu for a couple of years and did a couple of years of boxing, and I can teach some fundamentals, and anything I don't know, I'll learn. So, but then starting a nonprofit, I was like, whoa, like this is too much. And so I tried to ignore God for like a year. And what I love is that the way that I've gotten to know God is that he's so much more tender and loving and understanding and covers me with grace than I used to believe that he's more of that than I used to believe he was. I always thought he was more harsh, and so I just can imagine like this father, this good father following behind me and being like, okay, well, you will, but like, I'll just get you a little bit more like primed for it. And so I decided that after a year, I was going to go on a vision trip. So I was like, okay, well, if Congo isn't it, I had released that grip. So at least that worked of not being so set that it was going to be back in Congo, but I hadn't quite like gotten to the point where I'd say, okay, God, I'll do a nonprofit. So I went on this vision trip and I thought, okay, I'll see what God's saying. I'm going to go to Congo and Cambodia and Sri Lanka and I'll just see what God's saying. And I felt like God was like, what? Like, I'm telling you to start a nonprofit. And so, but I went and it really transformed me. And God spoke right through this one person. His name is Prashant Devisor, and he does Sri Lanka Unites, which is now Global Unite. So basically, he goes into the two warring countries and he gets the two opposing. Okay, he goes into a warring country, gets the two opposing sides to talk to each other through the youth, and it's really phenomenal. He started in his own country in Sri Lanka, and now he's in like I want to say 18 or something. So he sent me all around his bases in Sri Lanka, and it was looking at that I thought, okay, this is what it could look like. All of a sudden, it was like God was talking through this person of like, oh my gosh, this is what it could look like. Because at this point, I'm going around to different countries, different villages, going all over the place and teaching self-defense for like 2 hours and then leaving and going somewhere else. Well, I know from firsthand experience that I needed so much more than that. It wasn't just like a one-time seminar, not just to learn self-defense, but helping me feel empowered, like restoring some of that confidence after living in the world as a woman. You feel like, I think if nothing happens to you, you still feel vulnerable, but if something happens to you, you feel like even more so. And so, learning self-defense really helps not only prepare you for the future, but helps rewrite trauma from the past. And so it's so imperative that that can happen on a more consistent basis. And I couldn't be everywhere at once, and so seeing that he set up these leaders all over the place, I was like, oh my gosh, duh. So I came home and I started a nonprofit, and then I started the legal work of doing the nonprofit, becoming a 501(c)(3), and then the Lord had me go out, and I was invited by organizations, churches, friends of friends who were doing ministry in these places. And I would go and I would do some work, and I would see like, is there someone here that you want me to work with, God, like a local person? And lo and behold, there always was. And so I would start leaders in these places. And so now the Graceful Warrior Project, which is what my nonprofit is called, is in Congo, Haiti, and Tanzania. And we have local leaders and teams, and we start safe houses, and we have 4 pillars of self-defense: physical, spiritual, economic, and intellectual. So a lot of times we rescue girls and boys now out of really horrendous situations, and then we give them this opportunity at a new life, but within their own culture, within their own like familiarity, and they're getting to go to school. And we try to make the safe houses 100% sustainable so that now we can focus our efforts somewhere else. So we try to take a holistic approach and empower them completely. So that is the Graceful Warrior Project.
That's so amazing. I've heard you talk many times about this, but every time I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so cool.
Thanks.
It's so cool that obviously it's very hard work. I don't want to be like anyone can do it. I just mean like it's
No,
cool that anyone can look at this and say like I could, if God is leading my heart to this direction, or really putting something on my heart to like to minister to people, even if it's in a really small way. Like I think there's things we just think are hard, and so they're not possible, and they're possible. They just take a lot of work, and sometimes a lot of work on us personally to open
yeah,
ourselves up to what God wants to do.
it's so true. And sometimes we're our own biggest enemy when it comes to that. We are our biggest roadblock, because God's like, you can do it. And we're like, no, no, I can't. And other people are like, maybe the people around you are saying like, that's a big job. Do you think you can do that? But no one's saying no, like you're saying no. And so, cause I had people saying like, wow, that's a really big, are you sure you're gonna up for that? And
Yeah,
and God was like, you can do it. And other people were, you can do it. But I was the only one that really didn't believe that I could do it. And so, if just like what you said, if God calls you to it, like he's going to give you everything you need.
absolutely. I've had this thing, probably, I feel like I'm working past it a lot. It's taken a long time, because sometimes it's like, even though you feel like God is clearly telling you something, you're like, still just, like you
Yeah.
said, you just really fight it. And I
Yeah.
feel like there was this moment in, I don't know what it was, 2021 or 2022, when they're all together at this point. But I just was having a hard time, and it still is difficult. And I want to hear your perspective on this as well. But I was having a hard time just as a female, sometimes in ministry spaces. And I say that with like, I have the best husband and pastor and father and grandfather, and people who are like men who are so behind supporting me and like so wonderful. And I don't feel like, I mean, I am blessed, and I don't feel like I'm oppressed by men or anything like that. It's just
Right.
that it was really hard. Like sometimes it just feels like you have to acknowledge the reality. In some situations, there aren't men like that. There are some men who are in ministry spaces who don't take you as seriously as a woman, or just literally won't even listen to you, or like look at you to talk to you. And I was
Totally.
having a hard time, and I was praying, like I was like, you need to find a man to do this, God, because I'm not, like, I'm done. Find a guy to do it. I'll teach him how to do everything, and he can just be like getting it done and reach so many more people. And it just didn't, that seems to not be the plan. And I've been looking and searching, but that's not, at least at this point, what it seems that God is leading me to do. But I wonder, have you run into any of those, anything like that in your ministry leadership role, where it feels like maybe as a woman it's difficult in those spaces, or has it been not as much of an issue for you?
Yeah. Well, and I was going to ask you too, like, did you, like, were you not wanting to start a podcast, or what was it that you were trying to pass off?
We have the name of our organization is the Real Truth Ministries. And I was just like, we're trying to get into the schools to teach. We're trying to reach these churches so we can come and train leaders. Like, it's free. I just want to give it to you for free, all these resources. And it was like no one was taking it. And I was like, find a
Oh,
man, because I'm done.
got it. Okay. So you were feeling like, well, it must be because I'm a woman that it's not working. But aren't you didn't you create curriculums about like, sexual abuse and like how to come around that in like a really healthy way? I feel like it's better coming from a woman than from a man, don't you?
Yeah, I think, or at least maybe from survivors' perspectives,
Yeah,
probably.
you're right. That's a better way to say it. Yeah. Well,
But
and
there
I,
is a lot, like you said, like there is just some things. And really, I promise that I'm not like a man hater. I love men, but it's just that being a woman in this world sometimes, especially when you look at the really ugly, dark sides, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, it's just like there's sometimes where you're like, I just am scared, like I'm seeing all these things, and we're starting a lot of curriculums around pornography, and trying to holistically approach that from like a spiritual perspective,
Mhm.
and look at like, here's just like the real deal, like here are the harms, and here's what it, like how it affects your brain and your body and relationships, and from a spiritual perspective. And there's so much darkness And it's
Mhm.
like, man, if a lot of men are looking at this, that's really hard. Like to see how it affects people's brains and how they view women and how they view people and the value of people. That just feels like a big weight sometimes. And you just want to stay inside and like lock the door.
Totally, totally. I love that you're doing that, that you're taking that, like that you're talking about porn, that you're expanding what you're talking about, because I think it all plays in so much, obviously, to what you do. It's kind of like it's almost like being proactive, right? Like, because you're coming on the healing side of it. But if you came over here and said, like, and you addressed men, that's a lot of what we do too. We like what we're doing is like recovery care, like after something happens. But that's half the battle. The other half is it's talking to women about their worth in God, but also talking to men about, like, this is what it means to be a man of God, like a kingdom man, and how much like pride you can feel in being a man that's like, hey, I protect, I cover, I provide, I do these things, and like how much honor that you have in doing that, instead of like tearing down and being domineering and destroying. I think a good leader is someone that people want to listen to and to follow. And so if you have to take that by force, you're not actually a good leader, in my opinion. You're probably someone who maybe doesn't get a lot of respect, feels insecure, and so you're feeling like you have to take it instead.
Mm.
Uh, and that's not always to say on the part of the man. Sometimes maybe they're in a relationship with someone who is not respecting you, and you're not doing anything to warrant that. Like, it definitely goes both ways. There's two people involved in that, or many. So we definitely try to get as well with the men. um I think, I go into a lot of countries, and that's like, I remember when I was in Tanzania, in Masai village in January, and me and our videographer stayed in the village, and the rest of the team stayed at a hotel. And um, completely understand, because we were staying in this little mud hut, and like as soon as I see like them drive away in the dust, I'm just like, what did I just do? We don't have cell phone reception out here. um but it was incredible, and the women gathered around us first, and then that night the men asked to have a conversation with me, and I was like, what? Thinking like, why? It's not really necessarily something that happens a lot there. Is that all the leaders in the village, these men, wanted to talk to a woman. So we sat down and we talked, and then we talked again the next morning. I knew that in order to talk to them, I wanted to get their guard down. I wanted to help take their walls down and really get to the heart of it as much as they would let me. But I knew that like blaming and or like coming off so blunt and aggressive would immediately just put their walls up to me. Um so I started with like, and it was so cool because we were just under the stars, and like it was so beautiful, and all these Maasai men. It was just one of those experiences where you're like, I will never forget this moment. And so I was asking, like, okay, can you explain to me, because I've been in Maasai culture before, but I'm no expert. Like, what's it like to be a Maasai? And then, what is it like? What would you want to tell the world what it's like to be Maasai, and the things that you think are incredible about your culture? And then what are maybe some of the things that you wish you could change about your culture? And so this conversation went on for such a long time, and it was so interesting. But and I felt like at a certain point, I finally could be like, so instead of saying like, why do you rape little girls? Asking the question of like, why do you marry younger girls? And it was so interesting. And I think that, yeah, it was interesting to hear their response, and I think I've kind of trained myself to not be very emotional about it, because I think like I used to be very more emotional. I used to be like, let's, let's burn the village down, take all the women, let's go. And but that's not God's heart. God's heart is to like bring the men and women together.
Mm.
um and so I told them, and I promise I'll wrap around to your question.
No,
I
keep
told
going.
them, okay. The next day when we got together in the morning and the rest of the team came back, the leaders wanted to meet again. And they said, we want to work with your nonprofit. And I said, really? Because I said, that I send girls to school. And they said yes, because they'll marry the girls and they don't want them to go off to school. They want them to just be, their workers basically. And they said, that I teach them self-defense. And they said, yes. I was like, do you like that? And they were like, yes. I don't know exactly if they knew like what that really means, or if they just so desperately wanted to partner with us. But I told them, it's like imperative that like we work to help empower women. And so we can't partner with a community that keeps women down. And so, and my pastor was there and he was talking to them about how, in the Bible, how God is instructing us to work as a team. And that even though that looks differently between men and women, that we hold different like skill sets or abilities, natural abilities that were just put in us, like that we work as a team and we complement each other. And so I don't know that I actually got to tell them this, but we were talking about how some of the girls just graduated from veterinary school, and like their wealth is cows, or cattle and like goats. And so I said, don't you think like if you let your daughter or your wife go to school to become a veterinarian, and she came back and she made your cattle and your chickens and your goats the fattest that there are in all the lands, and if she helps them not get sick, and if she knew how to breed them better, and multiplied your herd or your flock or whatever it is, like that would be you guys working as a team. That would be so much better. So instead of pushing her down, you would be elevating her, and in turn, you would be helping yourself. And so it's that idea of like, if a man and a woman are together, one body, but the man is one leg and the woman is the other leg, and you you tie your leg to itself, one leg, and you have to hop the rest of the way because you're like, no, I won't let her walk. I have to be the walker. It's like you're harming yourself. And so, anyways, to say all that, I I have thought myself like, why would they want to talk to me? They would probably rather talk to maybe like a man um that they maybe relate with more. And I don't know. I think that I just like I don't think about it so much anymore. I think that something, if I'm insecure about something, I think that I show up and I think, no, pick someone else. And I have felt that way many times. But the more that I think, oh no, God is with me, like he built two safe houses, one in Tanzania, one in Congo. Like they're becoming so self-sustaining. We're doing it again in Haiti. Like this isn't me, this is God in me. And so if he's called me, he'll make a way. And so I don't have to almost like put out this resume for myself of just like, you want to work with me, you do. It's kind of like, well, it speaks for itself. If you want to work with us, you can. And if me being a woman bothers you, then so be it. Like it's not, this relationship isn't meant to be. Then I don't feel like I have to beg someone to want to work with me. And I think that just takes time. I think in the beginning it was like, what am I doing here? And I think I'll still feel that at different times as like God levels me up. But I think that, you just, if I can share with anybody that feels imposter syndrome or feels like they don't belong there, whether it's because their age or their gender or whatever, if God has called you there, like stand with your head held high, and you don't need to defend yourself. Kind of like, I don't know. I grew up in a really sarcastic family, and like we can make jokes about ourselves all the time. So, and doing jujitsu, I'm around like men a lot, and so sometimes I'll even like joke like about women, and this might not, like, probably will offend a lot of people, I get it, but I'll even make a joke like at my own expense, or just like, yeah, I should just get back in the kitchen, because I don't have an insecurity about that. And I know like that, um I just think it's actually funny. I don't know, maybe that's not, I shouldn't share that, but I think it's because I know my worth. I know what I bring to the table, and I don't have to do it in such an aggressive way. I can laugh at myself. I can say like, yeah, God could have picked someone else, but he picked me and I'm here. And so I've taken a more relaxed position about it, I guess. So that was such a long answer. I hope you
No.
can cut this out. Like,
No, no, there's so much wisdom in everything you just said. Oh my gosh. Also, like the confidence that you have, that is so incredible, is to just like sit down with a group of Maasai leaders and just like talk. That is, and oh my gosh, it's so incredible. It's so amazing.
thanks.
Yeah, I think that I went to a conference I guess it was this year. Wow, it's been a long year. It was March, and it was Preston Sprinkle's conference, Theology in the Raw, and he had 4 people talk about, it was like a synopsis on complementarians versus egalitarians. And so he had 2 men and 2 women. And what I really appreciated about one of the women, who was, I think she would identify as like soft complementarian, not that that's really relevant, but she said one of the things that's really helped her in her ministry, because she's a professor and she teaches a lot of young men in like learning spaces, which can be hard for some of them who are coming from really staunch
Totally.
backgrounds, and sometimes they lack respect for her, or
Sure.
they, there's a lot of things that can come up. And she said, if I'm truly following the model of Jesus for all believers, then it's like dying more to myself, and like to be a leader is to be the first one to serve others. And like just was sharing a lot of wisdom about that, of like, if you think a leader means being elevated above other people or being recognized or being thought of as superior, then that's like the most unbiblical model for leadership.
Totally.
It makes it a lot easier to come into those spaces if people aren't respecting you or responding to you in a way with, of like a lot of honor or something like that. That's not what being a good leader even means, or what it's
Yeah,
like.
totally. I also think that it's like how you were talking about earlier. I think that it's just naturally, and not for everyone, I think it's naturally a little bit more difficult for women, because we tend not to be so like aggressive and like, okay, I'm here, like I'm standing in the spotlight, like, and I'm more of an introvert, so I don't really like to do that anyways. Like I'll go if I'm called to like stand up there, but I'm not like elbowing my way to get there. And so I think sometimes like leadership, you see a lot of men in those positions because they are doing that to get there. And that's not that that's a bad thing. It's like, you gotta be aggressive to get to the top. And so sometimes when we as women are in leadership positions, it can feel awkward because we, I think by nature, are a little bit, and not all women, I don't mean to blanket statement it, but like we can be a little bit more subdued. We can be a little bit more yeah, just like calmer or gentle, or and so I don't think that those traits are necessarily synonymous with leadership, but I do think that there is a space within leadership for women who are not aggressive, that God calls us, and we say, okay, what would you like us to do? And so I think that, I try to lead with a lot of grace, a lot of mercy, a lot of humility. I don't know if I do it well, but that's my goal. And I try to lead also with like, I'm very detail oriented. So I want to know like all these little things before we do projects. Like I ask like 1,000 questions because I used to live in Congo. That gave me such a great platform to understand of, okay, like why is that like that? I got to see things firsthand so that when I went to do it myself, I knew the right questions to ask. And I knew, okay, I don't, and a lot of times in different cultures, they don't explain things the same ways that we do. So you have to ask so many questions so that you get like a full picture and you're like, oh, fine. Okay, now I get it. Now I think we should do this instead. And so asking those detailed questions, or the organizational part, or the vision, or like whatever it is that you bring as a leader, like you are called because of those unique things that you bring, and not necessarily because you're the first person that like stands up in your high school classroom to like lead a debate or whatever. Like you could be the quiet person in the corner that God's like, actually I want that one because her mind or his mind works the way that I need it to run this over here. So just to not discount yourself because you're not the loudest in the room or the biggest or the strongest. God uses the weakest ones, the ones you would never have picked yourself,
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really have to look at um, who we're modeling ministry after. And when we look at, we kind of talked for a minute about celebrity culture before we started. When you look at Christian celebrity culture, it can be easy to be like, they have a huge ministry and they're reaching, they have thousands of followers. So I want to model after this Christian celebrity or this Christian celebrity pastor or this Christian celebrity worship band. And we really have to model after Jesus, which can be not as attractive to some people because of what it is, because of what it means. And to have the spirit of Jesus is being like a servant leader who is like a sacrificial lamb. And that's obviously for many reasons, not like the most glamorous
totally.
leadership, but that's the model that Jesus asks us to have, which comes with a lot of difficulties and a lot of sacrificing.
Totally.
Yeah. So tell me about, what was your model for cross-cultural ministry? So how was there anyone that you looked at and said, wow, they do it really well? And how do I engage in that also?
Well, like I said earlier, Prashant Divisor with Global Unites, I just loved that he had this great blueprint that could work in so many different countries for that were at war, to get the two sides to talk to each other, to try and create like mediation and repair through understanding. And if he was only to implement that himself everywhere he went, he would be so limited. And so if he did it through local people, all of a sudden, like his reach just exploded. And so there's so many reasons why it's so good to have local leadership. And one is because your reach expands, but two, and probably most importantly, is because you are utilizing local people. You are empowering them to lead a project and organization within their own culture. And because they're going to have the best connections, the best network, they're going to speak the language, they're going to know how to address people, where to be culturally sensitive when they're addressing like a community or they're having a conference or whatever. There's so many times where I'll be talking to somebody in maybe Congo or something, and they are translating it. And because I understand a little enough French, like I can be a slightly conversational when I'm there, I'll be like, wait, what'd you just say? And they said like, oh, I have to like change it because that's not appropriate to say here, or that doesn't make sense here. So having people that are, instead of me just coming in and assuming that I know what's best in your cultures, partnering with local people and saying like, okay, here's what I bring to the table. I'll match that with what you bring to the table. And in turn, that will be the best for your community, because maybe I bring ideas and resources, but maybe you bring what is most crucial to actually implementing it in your own culture. And then also you're empowering people. That's the whole point, is that we don't want them to be dependent on us. And like, that's why we actually don't pay our leaders. We start passive income businesses that give them money, because if something were to happen to us, or I mean, anything could happen, we want them to always be able to pay themselves to be able to survive. We're not, oh, if we go, your money goes. No, we started you with passive income businesses that allows you to keep going whether we're here or not. And that's the whole idea behind our safe houses being 100% sustainable, is because we don't want them to say, look at what we're doing and we're leading all this. Oh, but we get our money from Mzungus. We get our money from Western culture. It's like saying, no, we actually run these moto taxis, this van taxi. We sell the remainder of our crops. We sell some of our livestock. Like, we have solar panels, we have our own well. Like, this functions because we make it function. The locals do, not outsiders. And so that in and of itself not only gives them stability, but it also like truly changes, I feel like, the framework of your thinking. When I used to live in Congo, like, you would cross the border from Rwanda into Congo, and there would be a small child there holding out their hands, can't speak yet, still strapped to their mom's back, but knows how to beg. And so you are like growing up with this begging mentality of like handout, which I'm not coming against at all, because you live in a place like that. You get anything where you can. We want to help change that mentality and saying like, no, I couldn't do it by myself. I'm getting help though, to go to school, but I am making things happen like on my own. And so that's the whole drive behind it, is empowering the local people so that we're always there for them if they need anything, but that they are not dependent on us for survival. So local leadership, for so many reasons, is, I believe, the only way to go. You can have missionaries come support, but not lead. I don't think they should have, a missionary should lead. I think a missionary should always be there to support and to like lift up the local people. I would have people come in all the time. Can you do this for me? And I'm like, no, but I will help you do it. Like, what do you need so that you can get on that stage and talk to your own people? So, yeah, local leadership all the way.
Wow. Yeah. That is so, oh my gosh, this is just like I'm learning so many things.
Oh,
No, this is so amazing. That was something that, so I mean, the way that we kind of sort of met, or I must have found you, and or somehow we got connected, was through Mariners. Did you attend Mariners regularly? Is that how
I want to say it was, did you do the Brave event?
I was just an intern for the global outreach team for a couple
Yeah,
of years.
where we met.
Yeah, it probably was. I think it was, because you did like the self-defense training on stage, and yeah, yeah, that was really cool. But yeah, so interning with them, I had come from a background that was very conservative, and in some cases fundamentalist. And so their approach to missions was very different than the approach that I learned from. And I'm so thankful that I got to learn from like Prashant Visher and his wife and his sister and parents, and like Africa New Day, Camille and Esther, and those people that I didn't know to appreciate all the wisdom that I was getting from them, but so much from those global leaders and the people that I was, just interning for. But to see that model and how much better it operates when it's not just like we're coming to your country and throwing stuff at you and then leaving,
Yeah.
But, and like, you know, we'll be back next year with a whole new group of people, but like we're building these partnerships that are lasting
Yeah.
and supporting, because like, you know how to minister to the people where you live the best. And also how much better for those people to rely on like their local church body to come to
Yeah.
continual support, and so many
Exactly.
benefits, so many benefits. And
That's
I've
so
heard a lot of lately, which I'm really glad that these conversations are starting. I've heard a lot of critique that I think is due, for a lot of like orphanage organizations that have kind of been infected by the Christian industrial complex of things, where it's like, it's not really the best outcome for the children or the community, because it's like they just have a continual rotation of
yeah.
missionaries from different churches all over the world, but not to come and partner. It's like kids on their spring break trip and they hold some kids and take some pictures, and that's kind of it. And
Yeah.
even there's this really great podcast, I'll have to send you this episode of a woman who ran an orphanage and just kind of realized like, this is not, we can support these people a lot better in ways that they can support their own communities.
Mhm.
And she was saying just the effects on the children was so rough, because it was like they really didn't have a family, because they were kind of in like essentially like a jail for kids. Like it was,
Totally.
you know, like they didn't have a home, and they just went through an assembly line to get their food, and then maybe they would
Yeah.
get some school, and then they'd go sleep in like a room with 100 bunk beds. And it was a lot of abuse happening, a lot of abuse of power, because like you said, people could say, we're going to pull our support unless you do this, and then your whole operation will fall apart.
Yeah.
And so it was just a really bad system. And also a lot of the children there had living parents or had
Mhm.
families that they could live with, but it was just like, this is so much cheaper and better if we send them to live in this orphanage where we never see them, and
Mhm.
they're raised by other people and often abused. And so she was just saying the model is so much better when they're in some kind of, either with their families, if that can happen, to just support the families instead of supporting this. Or for a lot of people in a lot of places, like she primarily operated in South America, there was a lot of drug abuse, there was a lot of abuse from parents, just unsafe living conditions. But she was saying just to have a family system, to have some kind of foster system where kids feel like they're part of a family, how much better that is for their development over time. It
Totally.
just changes. And also when you think of the spiritual aspects of that too, of like, here's Christians and they're coming in and throwing stuff and then leaving. How does that shape your view of God? So tell us about the model that you have, because I know, and I've seen recently you've posted a lot too about how important it is in the different safe houses and different places where you have girls coming, not girls and boys. I know you minister to boys now too. How important it is to have kind of like a family atmosphere for them, and like what that looks like. Oh, here we go. Okay, I lost you for a minute, but we were jumping into how you're kind of the model and idea that you have for your safe houses. I saw a post recently where you shared like it's really important that you don't have just a factory for kids to come through and be pumped out, but have, they have chores and responsibilities, and they feel like they're a part of a family, and why that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am hoping that more, I'm sure there are, I'm hoping that more and more safe houses are leaning in that direction, and not just a ton of kids, because and this is sometimes what I have to remind um our leaders, because they have such bleeding hearts, sometimes, is if we take someone in, we have to be prepared to wrap our arms around them and care for them. There's one thing for it to be crisis alleviation, right? Which is a lot of times like, okay, we have to go from crisis alleviation to empowerment. We can't stay in crisis alleviation. So if you're in a place and there's a ton of people, that need like your help right then and there, and you can do that, like you can foresee, like, okay, I can help these people, a lot of people right now. But I can't do it indefinitely. I can't do it for a long period of time. Then I think it's better, and this is just my opinion, I think it's better to start with few that you can help. Like, don't bring a child in that you can't make sure that you can feed every day, that you can't send to school, that you can't, maybe you're getting them out of a really difficult situation, which I think the child should be removed if there's abuse or whatever. I think 100% the child should be removed. But I think that if we are to create a safe house that is creating lasting change in the children that we do take in, that means making sure that they get fed throughout the day, 3 times a day, or whatever it is. Some cultures don't eat 3 times a day, so I always have a hard time saying that, but 3 times a day, or going to school, making sure they have their school books. And not only are we paying them to go to school, but how are they doing in school? If you are so overwhelmed because you have so many children that you don't know how this one child is doing in school, they're flunking out of everything. And so now you are, I don't want to say wasting donors' money by sending this child to school, but like, you're going to have to send them to school over and over and over, repeat the same grade, because no one can make sure that they are maybe getting tutored or getting help. Maybe they can't focus because they're still wrapped in so much trauma. So are you even aware of that? Should we be sending them to a psychiatrist? Which, I mean, they all need to be, but I would rather these children not grow up in a place that feels like a factory, but feels like a home, where, like, at our safe house in Tanzania, Erasto and Nema feel like mom and dad to them. They treat them like mom and dad. They are treated like their very own children. I asked Nema on the phone, like, how's it going with so-and-so? And so they only have around 16 to 18 girls, which still sounds like a lot. But when you're building a safe house and people are like, wow, how many kids can you take in? And they're thinking like, oh, 50 or 100 or some crazy number, that it's like, you're really going to make a dent, in what's going on in that population. But you can't do, like, you can't give the proper care that each child needs. So if God allows us, we build another safe house and we have another house parents there and we take in more children. But we take in kids, and the ultimate thing would be to return them to their family of origin in a safe setting and have it be healthy. But if it can't, we keep them and we see them through college, and it becomes such a family that they return and help at the safe house. And so I just love that so much. And it just is a testament to how much they're like, wait, this is our home. And we tried to pay Upendo, and she graduated from college, but she hasn't found a job yet. So we're paying her to help Erasto harvest and work with the crops, and also take care of the kids. So making sure that, they all have done their homework and checking their work and making sure their rooms are clean. And so she grew up there with them. They all see her as an older sister. So we're like, hey, we would be paying a social worker anyways. We want to pay you. And so Nema, her house mom, told her that. And she got so upset. She was like, you want to pay me? I'm your family. Why would you pay me? It was almost like offensive, because she felt like you wouldn't pay your own family to help with your family. And so I had Nema tell her it's from me instead, because she's doing so much work and she can't get a job yet. And so we're saying, like, hey, while you're looking for a job, well, we just love that that's how much they see it as family, and that they know what's going on with all of the girls, and there's so much care for all of them. And so that would be my hope for any orphanage or safe house or any foster family around the world, that even though numbers impress people, like, oh, we can have this much, or we made this much, or we're doing all of this, it's the quality. And, like, how are you actually affecting your community? How are you actually impacting the child that lives with you? And so that's going to make the bigger difference, because if you can really go deep and change that one person, they can change 5 people around them. Don't think like shallow but wide. Think like deep and really concentrated, because what you're doing is then you're instilling everything that's in you into these other people around you, and then they go out and do the same thing, and you create this multiplication. That's why I tell our leaders, I only worry about you guys. I only think about you guys. I don't think about the people around you. I don't think about your kids even. Like I it sounds wrong, but like I don't, because it would be too much for me to think about. I think about just them. How are they doing? How can I help them? They bring to me like, hey, this is what's going on with my kids or whatever, but I don't keep that on my plate. I just say, what can we do? You need money to send them to the hospital. Let's do it. So, but when it comes to them, like I go deep with them and I care so deeply for them and build them up, in any way that I can so that they can continue doing it to those around them. And I feel like that's, even though it's slower, like if you said, oh, I have a meeting with like 10 people, rather than saying like, I've got a conference with 1,000 people, the 1,000 sounds way more impressive. But if you are truly impacting a small amount of people, it's the tortoise and the hare. It goes so much further. And so it takes longer and it's harder to measure, but it's, I think, 1,000 times more effective.
Absolutely. It's hard too, because it seems like people really want, I don't know what it is. I'm trying to understand a lot of the elements of this, but especially from conservative spaces that I've been a part of, it's kind of like you said, like shallow and wide. And so I think people, unfortunately, I think, and maybe I'm just speaking from my own experience, but it seems like people really want to, I don't know, like it's something sounds really good about, hey, I'm giving to this orphanage and they support 1,000 kids. And like, it's like maybe a little bit we want to pat on the back, but also maybe it makes us feel good, like doing the most good with this money. And that's an honorable thing, to want to do the most good with your resources that you're giving to people who are serving Jesus, which is like, we should all want to do that. It's just, I think we are so, maybe because our capacity is so small individually without God to think of how he can work. And we want to just say like, there's no way that impacting 16 girls is going to make as big of a difference in this community as this orphanage is serving 1,000. But like when you look at the way that it's affecting those girls, and like the the examples that you shared, how they can really, I mean, one person impacting, even if they impact one other person, but continually changing that community and changing the way that families are done, and continuing, to change the way that people meet Jesus and see Jesus, and, like just changing maybe a little bit of like a local economy, how that can impact so much more. And maybe even, like a whole country. And like, it starts somewhere small. And so, it kind of has to work really well. But that's just not as, as cool and appealing sometimes.
Totally. And I don't want to at all sit here and think like I know everything, like compared to a lot of people. I have not been doing ministry, this type of ministry for very long at all. So there's probably a lot of things that I'm doing that people are like, I can't believe you're doing that. It's all a part of the learning curve, in that we, we're fighting for the same team and we're trying to do the best that we can. And so as long as we stay open-minded and open-hearted and say like, oh, okay, like actually, let me try that. That's a really great thing that they're doing over there. As long as we keep learning and growing from each other, then we're all trying to do the best we can,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really is a heart posture thing, because if the goal is, and I mean, sometimes our hearts can be in the right place and we can do the wrong things because we're maybe relying on the wrong people, or relying on the wrong, the things that we've learned, and there's a better way, or we just learn, like that's just a part of learning, is that you have to change to grow. Like you can't say the same to grow. So, but yeah, I think having a good heart posture is definitely a good place to start. So what would you say to people who want to pursue cross-cultural ministry, if they maybe they are familiar with the kind of model that you've explained, or maybe they're totally, this is totally new information, I've never thought of doing, sometimes we say missions or whatever kind of vocabulary you use. If you're going to another country to serve the people, to serve Jesus there, what would be your just like initial advice of how to approach that?
Yeah, so there's there's probably a lot of books, but there's two books that I always recommend whenever someone wants to come on a trip is I recommend When Helping Hurts, and then also Half the Sky. Half the Sky is really intense. So like if you read it, you're probably gonna have to take breaks. Just prepare yourself. But it gives you a really good global view of a lot of struggles going on, and it just helps like bring perspective and possibly new ideas and ways of helping. When Helping Hurts is really great because we naturally can think like, oh, that'll help, but actually like we're harming them. So I would say reading books like that would really help before you even go over there. And then I would say if you're wanting to do long-term help or starting a ministry, I would say go over and live there, even if it's for a couple of months, but you really get to see the culture, the people, you become friends. So our leaders are like, they're family to me. We don't look at it. I mean, there is mutual respect both ways, and there is, responsibilities that we all have, but they're family to me and I'm family to them. So, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So doing work so closely with people, you never want it to be looking down your nose at someone and saying like, oh, I'm helping you. It's like, no, like the amount of time that they've helped me truly. So I think going there, getting really familiar with the culture, and then also there's going to be things that you bring to the table that they don't like, budgeting or a familiarity with like entrepreneurship or things like that, where, okay, for example, our Haiti team, when we were discussing passive income businesses, we talked about moto taxis, and those work really well for us in other places. And so we buy a moto and we hire a taxi driver. So the taxi driver takes their money per day and they come and bring them money once per week. So now our leader is collecting passive income. And so that works really well, especially because it doesn't add anything more to the leader's plate. They're just collecting money. But one of our leaders had suggested that she wanted to do a pharmacy. And so it's not like pharmacy here, it's like a little kind of booth at times on the side of a road, and you can get medicine like for your baby or whatever. And so, and then you just have someone work it, or a little shop you rent out. So I'm thinking, okay, like it wouldn't be my first choice, but not gonna like overrule her because I could definitely be wrong. This could be amazing. You have to take risks when you're, especially in new countries. Not every country is going to look the same. So you're like, okay, maybe pharmacy will skyrocket here. Like, let's try it. It didn't work out, but we learned. And also, like, even though they're from that culture, they maybe they haven't had the funding or the resources or the opportunities to like test and see, where like even though I'm a Westerner and I'm not from that culture, I can still bring to the table my knowledge of like, well, I've done this in other countries and this might work. But so having an open-mindedness to seeing, like, hearing their point of view and trying things and taking risks, but also knowing like we all bring something to the table. And so to say, not to discount what you know because you're a foreigner, but also being willing to listen. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
What would you say? I'm trying to think of even how to word this question. I've heard, like I shared, it seems like maybe people are pushing back on some things that maybe should be pushed back on in terms of like cross-cultural ministry missions, or how we do orphanages, or whether we should even in the first place, all those things. And I've heard a lot of pushback and critique on short-term mission trips. What's your perspective on that? What can be the good? What can be the bad? How, if your church was going to engage in a short-term mission, cross-cultural ministry, whatever trip, what would be a good way to do that? in your
That's
advice?
such a good question. I think that, I mean, you brought up a really good point earlier about how, the kids are like getting used to people coming and then, they're getting their pictures taken. I would always say this is a little bit of a tangent, but if you are going to go and on a mission trip and you're going to be taking pictures of people, always ask permission if you can take their picture. Like always, because you could really hurt somebody or make a community mad. I used to have to take videos and pictures in Congo as a part of my job. And I would always have to tell them, I'm not making money off this, because people will come in and do a documentary and they'll make money, but it won't go to the people. And I've watched documentaries at like film festivals and asked them afterwards, are you giving any money to the people that you did? And so I can see why the people are upset and are saying like, don't just come in here and like use us. And so if you're going to take a picture, always ask permission. And then if you do, don't write some sob story underneath it if you post it anywhere, because maybe it's a little kid right now and they don't have a clue about social media or whatever. But think about if that was you and you're sharing, someone shared your story and there's you like looking absolutely like so vulnerable, and maybe you look sad, devastated, and there's your picture like up on someone else's social media telling your story, and you're like, what? Like, how insensitive is that? And so you always want to protect people. And so if I share pictures, people have said yes to it, and I try to say things that are uplifting. If I do tell a story, it's because like it's like, look at what they've overcome to be at this point. And so, because at the end of the day, like, if you are trying to get people to help these people, you need to explain the situation, but it's a fine art. You have to do it where there's so much dignity and respect given to the person, or the culture or whatever it is. I would also say, so yeah, short-term missions, just be careful. Read books like When Helping Hurts and stuff like that. And then our church, so we're trying to get churches to partner with our safe houses. So we have 2 churches in California that have partnered with our Tanzania safe house. So they're going to go at different parts of the year. But what that allows is that, and we're toying with this idea of putting on a summer camp or like a winter camp. So when the kids are out of school and the house mom and dad are maybe overwhelmed with, 18 kids running around, that we can go in and put on a camp for them, and we can invite other local kids in the neighborhood where we could have self-defense once a day for like 7 days, or 6 days. We could have, okay, an hour and a half of self-defense, and then you have an hour and a half of arts and crafts, you have an hour and a half of something. We're still playing with the idea, but and I mean, they're out of school, so we want it to be fun. We don't want it to be like, and school just continued for you. But that way it brings people in that feel like they have maybe an expertise in an area that really want to help. The kids feel like, oh, I'm really learning something, and getting to know these people, but also maybe it's the same people because it's the same church coming every year. And so they build relationships that way. Because I think there's going to be pros and cons to everything. And we don't want people not going to see these places and helping, because at the end of the day, we need to see that. We need to be made aware of what's going on in the world. We need to like break us up open and give us a different perspective. So I think that there's a lot of pros and there's also a lot of cons. And so we just have to try and make the cons not as much, and just be careful about how we help. But I never want to dissuade someone from going and seeing another culture and helping out, because you never know, like, if I never went and did a 2-week mission, like maybe I wouldn't have a heart for missions and I wouldn't be doing what I am now. So you never know the seed that's getting planted in someone, and or someone who's being completely changed by someone who's coming to visit. I think if we just do it really, like with a lot of self-awareness, that it can be a really healthy thing. Plus, with a church, like I don't want to overwhelm like one church with like, here's what's going on in all over the world. I don't think we should be aware of what's going on all over the world. It's too much for people. Like I don't, if something happens in the world, I'm like, gosh, that's so sad. Like I'm going to pray about it and then I'm going to release it, because I already have 3 countries I think about, and I'm not Superman. I'm not meant to, that's for somebody else to think about or pray about or help at. So having boundaries, but what I love is that with each church that says, oh, I'm just going to care about this church, that helps us because we can tell them, hey, we're fundraising for this. Will you help us? You know, we've got little girls that are having a lemonade stand, like a group of 10-year-olds that are having a lemonade stand for our Kilimanjaro girls. So they're getting to like know them and send them over the cute stuff. So yeah, I just think that if you did it more consistently and really consciously, I think that it could be a really helpful thing.
Yeah, it seems like, well, one thing, it seems like your heart posture going, because if you're like, I'm going to save everyone and here I am, then that's not a great place to start to engage in ministry at any point, but especially when you're going into someone else's culture and space. But also to approach it from a relationship base, which I think is one of those things that I was fortunate to learn from all those leaders that we talked about, was like the relationship is really important, like to build a relationship too, not jump from 0 to 60, but like we're getting to know each other just like you would if you were like dating someone, you know, like you don't like go from like we went on our first date, now we're married. It's like you have to really get to know what, you know, not just a person, but their culture and where they're coming from, what's polite and impolite and all those things, so that when you enter those spaces, you're aware and it's not just like throwing people their way. They're one of those, I can't remember if it was the same interview I mentioned earlier or something separate, but there was someone talking about on this topic, cross-cultural ministry and everything, and they were saying that there was a pastor that they knew of in, I think he was in like Brazil, and people were coming to their church and they were helping them build homes, but they were like, actually, it's not the best case for like us to have other people come in and build homes in our community, in our specific situation, because we're taking away work from other local people and they're like suffering at the end of the year. They're not making money. So we want them to. So he was just having people, he would have these kids move a pile of dirt back and forth. And he would say, okay, by the end of this week, move this big pile. And he ended up crying and talking to one of the guys from the church and saying like, I'm so upset. It's actually more work for you to come and visit when you come, because like we have not, you know, like you're not helping us, because you kind of just want to give people this fun experience and like a tourist for a week, but you're not, we have to make up stuff for you to do. And we're scared to say no, because we want you to keep supporting us, because we do need the financial support. So it seems like, because, you know, everything about your ministry is really based off of relationships and not just like, let us give you things, but like, why don't you grow it and we'll help you cultivate it. And we're kind of like fostering these connections and fostering these, you know, like making it possible, but coming alongside of you, not like up here throwing stuff down at you. That seems like so much health from a spiritual perspective, but also from just like a really practical perspective of how people.
Well, and thank you. That brings up such a good point about also short-term missions or even long-term missions. Like people are saying, what can I bring? Can I bring something? What can I give to them? And I think like, don't bring anything, because we want to like support their economy, their local economy. So like, don't bring old clothes. Like sometimes we bring rash guards, like for self-defense, but that's it. You know, like if you want to buy the kids like all a new shirt or whatever, like buy it within their own markets. And yeah, it's like you like hire people around you in their own community. And I think that's such a good point. I always try to tell people that, because, and also the other reason is, I mean, there's something to be said about like a sweet gift between a friend and a friend. Like I brought you this locket that I found and I'm wearing a matching one, you know, but to just bring stuff from like a highly commercialized place where, you know, we don't want people to get like expectant. Oh, they're coming with gifts. and also gifts that we can't get here. So like, I don't want them to look down they have in their own community and what the presents that they get maybe on their birthday or Christmas, if they do get presents. Like, I don't want them to think like I want an American present, and I don't want to condition them thinking that every time someone comes, they're coming to like give presents and just almost treat them. That's a huge thing for me, I think, to not treat them like, we have high standards for our leaders, like they sign a contract of like, okay, I know that as a leader, I need to have my update pictures done by the first of every month. Our Excel has to be done by the first of every month. And that's because like, it takes me a long time to go through everything. And so we set a date. Here is the day that you agreed to. And if you don't do these things like repeatedly, I'm not letting you go. You are saying that you don't want to be a leader anymore with us. There's always grace. Like if something comes up, there's always grace. But if you're showing like, hey, I don't want to do this, and people can say like, wow, that's like, you're going to let someone go. Like they're from like a really hard place or whatever. It's like, don't treat them like they're handicapped. Like I've lived among them. They're incredibly smart. You see little children that walk 2 hours with no food in their bellies to sneak into the back of a classroom to hopefully learn, because they know that that's their only way out, their only ticket, only to get beaten and chased out of the classroom. Little kids with no food walking through the most dangerous streets in the world sometimes. And so don't tell me these people aren't resilient. Like that's why I think they're much better leaders than we are, like within their own cultures. They speak 5, 6, 7 languages. I mean, they're incredibly capable. So to dumb them down by saying just give them a break. Like, I just think, no, like there's a standard and they can do it. They know they can do it. So when it comes to, ministry, like treating them as if they are the intelligent human being that they are, gives a lot more dignity and respect than treating them like they can't do anything. Just like on missions, if you go on a short-term mission, like they're going to do their best their hospitality is out of this world. They're going to do their best to just cater to you hand and foot. Don't let them, like, I mean, yes, they're like, you would dishonor them sometimes if you don't receive a gift or if you don't try their food. Like there's always like you have to tiptoe around these things, but to say like every time after you eat that the little girl in the kitchen that's like washing dishes, you just hand her your dish and you walk away like, no, I can wash my dish. I'll help you. What's your name? So don't just let someone's hospitality take over, because they will help you to their own detriment. And so like, if you're going on a short-term mission, don't be like, no, you're not going to help me. Just say like, I'm here to help, partner with you. Like, let's do it together. So that would be another tip. I feel like I'll keep thinking about that. I'll probably think about it tonight while I'm sleeping, but
That's so good. There's so many good things. I'm so happy that we had this conversation. I love it so much. I've had a lot of contention with those questions, and I've been on with the Mariners, where I keep talking about the big church that I was interning for and we met through. They called mission trips faith adventures, which I really like because it kind of detaches all of the baggage that comes with missions, and it's not like we're going to save everyone. It's, it's like this, you think about it in a different way. And also because they're like, we're going to go visit our partners who we've had a really long-standing relationship with, and a lot of whom we have personal relationships with, and we've, met these people multiple times, and we're coming back and they know us and we know them and keep up with each other. That it just seems like that is so much more the model of the global body of Christ that Jesus wants us to have. Yeah. And is so much more useful and effective for expanding the kingdom of God, expanding the love of Jesus to the rest of the world through that. Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, like if you hadn't been on the short-term mission trip, then maybe you wouldn't be doing the work that you do today. And I think a lot of I am so glad that I was able to travel travel to the Middle East because I met people that I'm still friends with, like I think of as like actual genuine friends, and to hear their perspective on a lot of things has been so helpful. One of them helped me design my tattoo, one of the tattoos I got, because it's in Arabic. Like there's just cool, I don't know, just cool things, cool relationships that you can have. And to see Jesus through someone else's eyes too is just such a beautiful thing. And to be with them, to worship in their own language, and to see that Jesus isn't an American guy who, who speaks English. Like I mean, yeah, anyways. Yeah, I think that I mean, like that's an experience I wouldn't trade for any money in the world, because has changed me from the inside out. I think probably when I went, I probably, at least the first time, was not in like the most responsible cross-cultural ministry that reflects the Bible mindset. But I'm really glad for those experiences. And so I don't want to sound like it's unfaithful or not Jesus like to engage in those things, because like you've said, there's some really positive things. It's just we have to approach them in ways that are careful. And I don't know, there's a lot of things to think about. I think maybe advice would be like, not that I'm like someone to give advice on this, but maybe to not be as flippant with it, or just like ask, why am I going? Or like, why am I posting these pictures? Or why do I want to have a picture of this?
Be really thoughtful about it. Like, and if there's like real connection there, or if you think, like I might have a picture with like me and a little boy named Judah, because it's like, oh, he just like every time I go, he like runs straight to me, and so I just love him. And or like, oh, if you think this girl's so beautiful and you're like, oh, I want to take a picture, like exactly how you're saying, like, why are you taking the picture? Why are you sharing it? And if you can always say like, will this give dignity to this person, then yes. And if you got their permission, obviously, and all of that. But I think you're right. Just like, we want people to go, and they want people to come, they want people to come and see them. But I think if we do it thoughtfully and prayerfully.
Absolutely. Before we go, I want to ask you one more question, because I probably should have asked you this earlier so that this seems like in chronological order more, but because you're exposed to a lot of things, like a lot of just horrific things that humans go through, how do you, especially as a leader, so like you're, facilitating a lot of things, and a lot of people are connecting with you regularly, and like you just have a lot of work on your hands, how do you keep a healthy balance of those things? Like, how do you care for yourself after being exposed to those things? Because that's like, oh my gosh, sometimes, I mean, because we're holistic beings, because we're not just a brain on a stick. It's like when we just see those things or hear about those things, it can affect our bodies physically. Like, what is your experience with that?
That's a really good question. Actually, this year I was on a sabbatical that I'm just now kind of coming out of, because we had one of our safe houses was raided by rebel soldiers, and it was very intense, like, and it just set off like so much fear in me. And I struggled with a lot of anxiety after that happened. And sometimes when I come back from trips, it just depends, not every time, but I can feel anxious when I get back, or like down. And that's like, so I do really good I think a lot of people can say that, like they do really good in like high conflict situations. But then when you leave it, your nervous system is like, oh, I'm safe. And so then like everything just dumps. And so it could be in the moment and plus I'm a sensitive person, so I feel other people, and my therapist says that's why I do what I do. And so not to like hate it, but it can be very intense. And I'm still learning like how to navigate that if you want to do it for the long term, so that you don't burn out. So my board has gotten a lot more involved with the team meetings every week. So like they'll take on a person, a team, because normally it's just me talking to them on a weekly basis, but now, which is great that they get to talk to them. And get to know them really well and become close and all of that. So I think that bringing other people in, so it's not just you, that is so close up and personal. And then also setting really big boundaries for yourself. So sometimes I can get bowled over by what they are going through, but for the most part I can have pretty good boundaries where I'm like, I'm talking to them on the phone, I'm like, let's pray, what can we do, how can I, like, set something up for you. But then when I get off the phone, I'm like, okay, God, that's yours, not mine, it's yours. And so because I'm not supposed to live with like everything that's going on in my world and then like 7 other worlds, it can't be like that, it's not sustainable. So boundaries are key with me. Sometimes I'm not good at doing it, but for the most part I am. And then just like giving myself a lot of grace, for feeling a lot for them, and knowing that it's okay. I think I still struggle with that, feeling like, God, why did you call such a like sensitive person to be involved in such heavy work, and I don't know the answer to that. I do know that like God like gives me so much support, and I then have to remind myself like we're eternity minded, not this world. Like if I'm gonna try and save my own skin and my own well-being, like I can to a certain extent, but then if I have to be eternity minded, like, hey, what's more important here is that like someone comes in and helps these people, that as many people as knows about it can come in and help, and that we're all supposed to be helping. And so yeah, I don't want to get to heaven and regret not doing something because I was afraid to, or thought that it would just affect me too much.
Yeah. It's hard to, well, at least for me, and I'm sure, as you said, you're very sensitive, so maybe you share this as well. It's hard to stay, like, keep your heart soft sometimes, because it would be so much easier to make it really hard. So things would, not impact you as much. And
Yeah.
can
How do you do that? Because you work with a lot of hard stories too.
This year has been hard. Like I said, we are looking to expand to do more curriculums that touch on pornography and are just being proactive about those things. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the organization Exodus Cry, and there's some others as well who look at trafficking and pornography and abuse and the correlation between those things. So they have really excellent resources, and some others as well that just take a really honest look and don't really sugarcoat things about the industry. And even in the like documentaries and the resources that they have, the books, it's showing like the best, the like almost like the most easy to handle, and it feels like you're being overwhelmed and like drowned with the most horrible information
Totally.
in the world. And there was a great book I read. It's called, I think it's just called Predator. It is by Dr. Anna Salter, and she is a clinical psychologist who works with sex offenders. And so her work is also like, she's very proactive. Like, I want to know basically why people commit these crimes and what are the most effective ways to treat them, and a lot of different things. And in her book, she wrote, I mean, the book is like, it was so hard to read. I tried to read it in 2 days because I was like, I don't think I can stretch this out. It will wreck me if I need to get it over with and deal with it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she says at the end of the book is like, you cannot think of the world in these ways. Like, you cannot look at, it's not like you have to ignore reality, but you cannot look at the world through the lens of like anyone could be a predator, and you want to be aware of those things, but you can't live thinking everyone is the worst and has the worst intentions. It seems like that would be the best to keep you safe, but we just know from a psychological perspective that you will have a terrible life if you live that way. People who are trusting of others, who care for others, who think that other people have the best intentions, they are just happier people. They have longer life expectancies. They have just better lives. And so it's like, she was just kind of holding this place of, you don't have to trust everyone you meet. Like, you don't have to say, here, I entrust you with my child, or like jump in my car, but you can also just like, I think like you were sharing, maybe not dwell on things as much. And I think from a faith-based perspective, that's a lot easier because we have someone who will carry our burdens, who is, who is with us all the time. And that makes that easier. But I think just being able to acknowledge those things and work through them, and then say like, I was not created to hold space for all of these things, for all the things happening in the world, or with all, I mean, just the horrendous things that happen, but God created me to, maybe facilitate these relationships so other people can create healing. Or when I talk to survivors, and work through things with them, or just try to connect them to resources, just to say, right now I'm giving them, my heart, and I'm going to be here for them. But like, when we're done with this conversation, it's also like my job. And so I might have a personal connection with them, but also like, I can't take work into my marriage, or into, when I'm spending time with my family. That's just not the right place for those things. And maybe people feel like, could feel like you're not being emotionally sensitive if you're not thinking about those all the time. But also, we have to be able to recognize sometimes things are out of our control, and all we can do is everything we can, and then that's it. Or we say a prayer and that's all we can do. But like, we have to say that's all we can do, and it's not easy for us to dwell on those things.
Yeah. Because otherwise you will absolutely get like steamrolled by it, and like steamrolled by the need. Like, for a long time, I had people sorry, there's a fire truck. For a long time after I lived in Congo, so many people had my number, and people were just asking me for like so much help. People I had met once or twice, and you want to help because it's such a good reason, but it's like, I don't have a ton of money. I don't have like infinite resources, and I can't. And so I had to get really focused on what God was calling me to do. And if it fell outside of that, I couldn't do it. And to just honor that and say like, hey, I can't, but I can pray for you and believe that God is looking out for you more than I am, and is capable of doing so much more than I am. It is that like Superman complex of like saying like, okay, I'm not their savior, and pointing them back to God. And that's another thing too, is like always reminding, whoever you're helping, I'm working hard to do it. I'm not sitting on my bum doing nothing, but like always pointing them back to like, hey, it's God who's helping you. If I wasn't here, he would send somebody else, and that all of the good things are coming from him. And I'm just so thankful to be a part of it. And it's like an honor for me to work at it, but like God could take his hand of favor off of us like that. I do not think for a second it is because of, me working a certain amount, or being like, I don't know, funny or whatever, like whatever could charm someone. It's all God's favor. And so, wait, I just went on a tangent. What did you say right before that?
You know what? I don't even remember. I liked where it went. So
perfect. Totally. Yeah.
So present in the moment that we both forgot. But it's just, I think we just have to glean so much of wisdom from, like, just really rely on Jesus to give us wisdom, and rely on his wisdom, because these things are just hard and they're not simple. Like, maybe that's where a lot of the challenges in cross-cultural ministries, and in any ministry, and anytime we're with people, maybe challenges come from, we want to oversimplify it and just say like, this is the quickest, easiest way to do this thing, or I don't know, just the most effective. And that's not always the best way, and it's not always has great outcomes for either side, and there's not a lot of wisdom in that. And so I think there's just no way possible that ministries that deal with these really difficult things could operate without a faith perspective and without Jesus. And
I don't know how they do. I don't know how they do. Because
Yeah.
I am clinging to him like crazy. And yeah, I just, yeah, I hope that people, because I want to say, I don't know what statistic it is, but like the amount of people who are, I don't know if it's missionaries or start nonprofits or whatever it is, and how like quickly, how short of a like career or not lifespan, but career span, or like because it's overwhelming and intense. And so I don't want that. Like the harvest is great and the workers are few. Like I don't want the workers that are there for us to burn out. So taking those boundaries, saying to yourself, I can't help everyone. I shouldn't help everyone. And like,
And when we're the body of Christ operating how we should, I think then that makes it so much easier because you're like, I can't help you, but I know someone who maybe could, or maybe they know
yeah.
someone who could.
Yes, exactly. It's so true. Or pointing them back to resources within their own community.
Mm.
Oh, you know what? There's a program at UJN that actually helps with stuff like that. Why don't you go ask them? Because then it helps them to like, to train them to be like, I'm going to look for the answer within my own culture, my own community, instead of, I mean, so many people that I've talked to in third world countries think that like America is heaven and that we have all the answers, that just simply being Western, like I know anything about technology or can, I mean, it's just crazy the things that they asked me to do just because they thought, oh, I like we know everything. And I was like, I do not have a clue how to do that. And so, and just being like honest about it, like not, you don't have to wear all the hats and have all the answers, and get comfortable disappointing people. Like the look of disappointment on someone's face. You're not going to help me, and being like, I'm so sorry, I can't. And, but like, oh, why don't you try over there? And like, Lord, I just pray that you would show this person, get comfortable with looking at someone being disappointed, that you're not going to say, yes, I can do anything for you. It's hard. That's really hard to do, but necessary and
Yeah.
healthy.
And hopefully can break those patterns of like it's sad that there have been so many systems in place that have made people think that that's the way that the world works. Like
Mhm.
you have no chance, but these people from Western cultures, they know it all and they have all the resources and all the money. Like that's really sad that that's been integrated into like the fabric of society and like the reasons why those things have happened. So hopefully that can also change those things and those perspectives.
Totally, totally. You should come because I just love what you're doing. I would love for you to come and like teach and give your curriculum to our leaders, because I think that's so important for them to have like so much knowledge of how do we handle when girls and or boys come in here that have been through so much abuse. Like how do we handle the situation and talk about it and treat them, and what are some tools we can give them. And I just think that would be so amazing. And I don't know if you'd be open to it, but we would love for you to come.
Yeah, let's talk about it. That would be so yeah, I would anything from you, Kelly. I would list any day. Be
Thanks.
there, signed up first row.
I love it because you created this curriculum, right? So like you can literally give that to someone else and teach them, okay, take this, and maybe while you're there, how does this, because do you have it in other cultures, or is it primarily for America?
Primarily for our space and context, because it's a lot of looking at probably from a very American perspective, like
Yeah.
the reasons
Yeah,
why people support the commercial sex industry and then how that,
yeah,
all those things. But I
for sure.
have worked with actually someone, I don't know how in the land she found me, but someone from South Africa reached out and they kind of just made like a mini training for her in like just did some research on South Africa and talked, looked at some resources that like specifically we're looking into that culture and through that cultural lens. So I've like barely dabbled in in looking at this through other
I
cultural
love it.
perspectives, but
I mean, because what if you came on a trip with us and then you sat down with the leaders and you talked about okay, let's look at this page. What would you, because we have a self-defense curriculum that is verbal, proactive, and physical. So we change that for like whatever culture we're in. And so if it is, I can't just walk in. So we change because maybe the examples I'm giving is for a Western society, but I'm like, okay, so in here we'll put in when you're like walking through your village and set, you know what I mean? So we give like more culturally appropriate scenarios. So if you came on a trip, that could be super fun. If you sat down and were like, okay, let's make this for Tanzanian culture, or maybe not even Tanzanian, like within, because sometimes there's multiple cultures within that country. So for this culture, and we could put it in their language and we can have it bound up in a book there, and they could use that at wherever they go, not just at the safe house, but everywhere they minister to. That could be really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like all of this is just so much of a perspective on why we need a global family who follows Jesus and not just one culture and one perspective. Because it's like, how many more people could we reach with positive things like this if, we can work with them and they can say, yeah, maybe this doesn't fit, or, like you can't just put stuff into Google Translate and expect it to make sense to someone.
No.
That's so amazing. Well, I promise, I know I've taken you like a really long time. I promise I'll let you go. Before you do, tell me about the curriculum that you wrote, the book that you have, and people can purchase that or they can access it through your website.
Yeah, yes. I mean, so it's on Amazon. It's called Finding Myself in the Gospel Story. And so it toggles back and forth between the gospel story, like from the Bible, and then to my story. And that's not my story, it's the reader. So it's going like creation, the gospel story. So you're reading about it, and then it's going creation, my story. So how does that, what we read in Genesis, how does that translate to me right now? And so we go through the Bible, and it's simple, but I hope that it's still like challenging and intellectual. I didn't want to miss any of the important things, but I also wanted to like have it be understood by people who are illiterate, or that have never been to school, but who can understand if someone's speaking to them. And so, but still don't want it to be over their head. So I wanted it to be good for anybody, and it just kind of create that base. Because, we work with a lot of Muslims at times. And so whether you've heard the story or you've never heard of who Jesus is, wanting to kind of start everybody off on the same level. And so it's been translated, I think, in 6 languages. We had it professionally published, and you can get it on Amazon, but I didn't necessarily write it with the intention thinking that people were going to necessarily buy it. I just thought I wanted to have something like professionally done to show like this is what we are doing with our teams. And then actually right now I'm working on the second curriculum, which is the first part of it goes to all of the scriptures that have been used to oppress women, taken out of cultural or historical context. A lot of times you can get a pastor, maybe like in a Maasai village or in some village somewhere, that hasn't been to seminary, hasn't studied the Bible, doesn't have a mentor, and is misinterpreting the Bible. Or maybe they have all of those things, but maybe their mentor doesn't have, enough information, and so is taking things out of context and using it to oppress women in an entire village. And so wanting to bring cultural and historical context to those scriptures. And then the second half, once we know that, and we're like, oh, so God does have a heart for women. Once we know that, like, here are the women in the Bible. The second part, here are the women in the Bible that God uses. And what is he telling us about his character through their stories? The fact that he first showed up to women, the fact that, like, there were apostles that were women, and the women that funded his ministry, that women are valuable, that there were pastors as women. So bringing light to that, and allowing men and women to read it and just be like, hey, we're not saying that every woman has to be like, all the dads are stay-at-home dads now, and the women are all going to become doctors and rule your village and pay back or whatever. We're not saying any of that. We're just saying that look at how much Jesus values women. It's so clear in the Bible. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's just like jumps right off the page at you. It's like, of course. And so once we know that, okay, now it is your God-given right to become what he has put in you to be, whether that's a stay-at-home mom or a librarian or an astronaut, whatever that is. And then also, now that you know that, because it's one thing to think that the men in your village are like thinking that you're less than, but it's another thing altogether to think that God made you that way. So once you know that God's made you with inherent value and purpose, now you're, maybe if you have the ability, you're more selective in choosing a mate, because you're like, oh, okay, well, what is your view on women and in marriage, and will you support my dreams as well as me supporting you, or do you think that like my role is just this, so I think that the more that women know like their place in God's kingdom and their place in his heart, the more confidence they'll have. And hopefully that affects a lot of things.
That is so incredible. I'm like giddy. Like, I'm so excited about that. That's amazing. That's been something that that has made me love the Bible like so much, spending the past couple of years really looking into like, okay, what does the Bible really say about?
Yeah.
Let's get into Levitical law. What does it say about
Yeah.
sexual abuse? And what does it say? What does this passage mean when Jesus calls this Gentile woman a dog? And like, what are these things?
Yeah.
And you can read it through the perspective of, especially an ancient mindset, but as having like Middle Eastern brothers and sisters. Like Kenneth E. Bailey lived in a Middle Eastern context for a long time and wrote a great book called, oh, I get it mixed up. There's Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes, which is a great book. I think his is like Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes or something. There's so many great books from people who live in a like honor shame culture, who can illuminate these things for us, and we need them to help us so badly in our Western context, because and even in a context in Africa, where people might be coming from a background where they are just not familiar with scripture and familiar with first century Jewish Palestine, and and
Totally.
to use those things, to misuse them. That's so amazing, especially to help women see just that they have value and how much that can change a woman's life and change a whole family and a community.
Yeah.
And wow.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, I definitely I will contact you more about that, because I'd love to hear what you've been studying and pick your brain about that.
Yeah, same. I'm so excited. I'm like, this is so wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And tell people, where can they find info on the Graceful Warrior Project and things that you're working on and all of that?
Awesome. Yeah. The gracefulwarriorproject.com is where you can see just an overview and videos of what we do, but also it has a drop down of the countries that we work in. And that acts as like a blog. So you'll get to hear the updates from the leaders and see pictures and videos every single month to stay up to date on what they're doing. If you sign up or if you donate, you'll automatically be signed up, and that will come to your inbox once a month. You can also find us on Instagram or Facebook, the Graceful Warrior Project. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so much, Carlie. I've loved talking to you, and I can't wait to see what God has in store for collaborations with us in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving your time, and check Kelly out and check out the Graceful Warrior Project and get informed and be praying or get involved in any way you can, because it's amazing. So
Thank you.